Hello everyone. Today we are going to study about the French Revolution. The French Revolution is one of the most important events in the history of Europe. It was a great triumph for the idea of democracy, where it enshrined the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty implied that the governments should function according to the sovereign will of the governed and not according to the dictates of the autocratic king. The individual should be guaranteed the possession of all personal liberties, which no state might curtail. Such were the freedom of opinion and worship, and the press. The French Revolution proclaimed the liberty of owning private property as an inherent right of man. To understand the French Revolution, you have to look into the society of France, which was not a monolithic block like in all societies. It had very different layers of the population. Now, the old regime was a regime of the ancient, and France wanted to hold on to this old regime. It was a country which was ruled by an absolute monarch who had control over everything. The government had a lot of control over all spheres of the lives of the individual. Now, you see, the people were divided into two classes. One, it was an underprivileged people who were the most hardworking as well as tax paying population of the society, whereas the other section, the minority, were the privileged people who did not pay any taxes but enjoyed all the very lavishness of life. You must have studied about the movement of Renaissance and how it wanted to do away with the hold of the church over the lives of the people. A similar fate was also witnessed in France, where the First Estate, consisting of the church and its members, held a lot of important positions in the lives of people. This was the First Estate. The Second Estate consisted of the king and the nobility. They were a privileged class, of course, but came directly under the First Estate, that is the church. So everything around in France was controlled by the First Estate, that is the church, and the governing bit was done by the Second Estate, that is the king and the nobility. You can link this to the Indian society where we had the Varna system and later on the caste system, where ruling was done by the Kshatriyas, but the thinking bit was done by the Brahmins right at the top of the society in the hierarchical positions. The third estate consisted of the common people who did all the hard work and paid all the taxes, with which the first and the second estate ensured the lavish life that they could live. In this table, you can see the first estate had all the privileges of controlling the education, the press, and they did control all the documentation that was done in those days, like keeping records of birth, death, and marriages. The Catholic faith had a tremendous hold in the society. These members of the first estate paid no taxes and they were not governed by the laws of the country rather than the law of the church. And therefore, the first estate was right at the apex of the French society. The task of the second estate was to govern. These consisted of the king's men, the nobles, who collected all the taxes and owned 20% of the land. They had control over the military and made all the appointments of the state. They were under the first estate, however, but their military power was absolutely necessary for the well being of the state. A remarkable feature of the French Revolution was that the society during this time was governed by the king. As you have seen, that the king was subdued by the power of the church. Hence, it was God who gave the right to the king to rule, and the representative of the God, the church and its representatives, had a direct control over the governing of the country. So, we can say that the divine origin theory of state was very much practiced in the French society before the French Revolution, under which it said that God put the world in motion and the power was given by God to the king to rule.